Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Survivor Becomes a Dungeon. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 135. Chris' Point of View. "Yeah, who are you all?" the teen mage asked as he leaned on a rather ornate-looking staff. Chris took a moment to collect himself. These adventurers were younger than his team, but he didn't want to say anything to overtly antagonize them as he looked them over. "They're freelance contractors that Vito hired. Who are you?" he asked, turning the question back on them. The mage actually looked a little sheepish at that point as he scratched his cheek. I see. Well, we're adventurers who have associated with Mr. Vito before. Considering the dangers of the road, we figured we could tag along with him to watch his back. And hopefully in turn he'll help watch over us. It's safer to travel in bigger groups after all," he explained, simply enough. "What dangers?" Chris asked, wondering what they meant. His mind went back to the report he got from the guild last night. There was some activity in the capital to keep an eye out for, not to mention the activity regarding the deserters from the northern territories that settled in the hegemony, but there was nothing overtly troublesome as far as he knew. The armored teen spoke up next. "Active banditry currently along the main road to the capital and in the surrounding areas. They tend to not harass large groups and caravans in general beyond demanding a tax of foodstuffs, but it's better to play it safe, especially with the rumors that they've been taking people now and then." "But bandits? Why hasn't the local guard or even adventurers taken care of them yet?" Chris asked, his ears flicking in thought as he regarded them. If there was anything adventurers were good for, it was cleaning out the bandits and the monster nests. The armored teen then shook his head at that. "They're a dangerous group, made up of deserters of some war in the north. Quite frankly, they're too strong for most adventurers to handle on their own," he mentioned before leaning back on the front counter they were all standing around. The innkeeper's son was also there, but seemed more content with actively eavesdropping on the conversation than walking off or asking them to move away. Chris's brows quirked at that, though if they came across any bandits, he was almost certain Vito would be able to make them disappear, or worse, easily enough. "How strong are they? What do you know about them?" The armored teen tilted his head to side. "They're rated as a gold-level threat. It's not that they're all especially strong, but there are just that many of them, all with military training and being led by a notable war mage. Currently, it seems they're just trying to stock up for the winter. So we're being advised to stay out of their way and let them take the food they're demanding from passing caravans." Chris just nodded as he sighed, scratching the back of his head. It makes sense. If they're strong enough to hold their own, then it's likely none of the wealthy merchants or local governors want to risk their own men to clean the bastards out. "I see. Well, I suppose if it's the group you're looking to travel with, then you'll have to take it up with the boss," Chris mentioned, not saying anything positive or negative in regard to what the adventurers were looking for and playing into what he already said about working for Vito. The armored teen nodded in understanding. "Fair enough. My name is Rance, and this is Cecil and Lily," he mentioned as he gestured to the other two who were with him. Chris gave a small nod before gesturing to his team. "I'm Chris. There's Zax, and that's Sarah. And this is my little sister Ren," he said as he patted Ren's hooded head while she gave a small wave in response. The trio of adventurers smiled a bit, Lily silently returning Ren's wave when suddenly their attraction was pulled to something coming up behind Chris's group. Turning to look, Chris is momentarily startled to see a massive wolf coming up to them. The wolf in question was accompanied by two cats which sat on its back, the three of them looking over at the group curiously. The white cat was seemingly happy to see Rance and his group, meowing out almost cheerfully to them. The trio of beasts was accompanied by a brown-furred rabbitkin woman with the lop ears and what looked to be an intentionally shabby bob hairstyle. She wasn't armed, but was rather well-dressed in traveling clothes made with quality materials. She even wore spats, accompanied by soft leather wrapping on her feet, which wasn't necessary for most beast skin, but certainly showed that she was at least wealthy enough to splurge on unnecessary footwear and clothes meant to endure travel according to Chris's reckoning. The rabbitkin woman looked over the assembled group curiously, plucking a small piece of paper from a pouch on her hip as she looked over whatever was on it, before looking the group over again. "Well, now, there is more here than what I was told, which amongst you are Mr. Vito's associates." At that, Chris spoke up as he stepped forward. "Now it'd be me and my team. Vito hired us yesterday and told us to wait here for him." The rabbitkin nodded intently, her pink nose twitching in thought, before she then looked at Rance and his group. "And you are?" Rance spoke up at that. "We are the adventurers who have business in the capital. We've associated with Mr. Vito before, and we're hoping to join him as he journeyed off to the capital as well." The rabbitkin woman hummed in thought as she looked the trio over. "I see. And how much do you intend on charging for your services?" Rance smiled as she shook his head. "We're not charging anything. We've even prepared our own food and supplies. All we want is to travel with his group." The rabbitkin woman looked almost pleasantly surprised by that claim, before quirking a brow curiously. "What are your ranks?" she asked, though Chris could see her eyes noting the elite badges the trio of adventurers wore. "We're still going on to Sapphire if we do well with our evaluations in the capital," Rance explained, sounding justifiably proud about the fact, as he offered a smile. The rabbitkin woman nodded intently again. "I am not permitted to make decisions on behalf of Master Vito as of right now. However, you are free to follow me to him so that you can make your request in person," she explained rather professionally. With that, she turned, making her way out of the inn as the wolf followed after the rabbitkin woman. On the way back, Chris watched as Rance took a moment to grab a small folding cart by its handles and proceeded to follow after the group as they made their way across town. Before long, they were deep in the merchants' quarter, going through the warehouse district as they passed by a number of wagons and merchants, making their way out of the fort town. Most of them were not capital-bound, of course. Their destinations likely were the other towns and villages in the immediate area. According to the report Chris got last night, the last caravan that was headed to the capital left 3 days ago, so it is unlikely that they'll be traveling with anyone else for the majority of the way. "Oh, wow! Is that a Miners' Guild guildmaster?" Zax said, as they rounded the bend and approached a certain warehouse. Sure enough, Chris spotted Vito speaking with the dwarven guildmaster. A smile on his face as he talked about something or another. Vito certainly looked a lot less intimidating in the daylight and when not being confronted by him in a dark alley. However, that's not to say Vito doesn't cut an imposing figure in the light of day. As they approached, Ren tugged at Chris's sleeve before looking up at him. "Is that the guy who you said can heal me?" Chris nodded intently. "Yeah, that's him. Don't bother him with that right away. He looks busy, and it won't do to interrupt his business," he warned quietly. If his guess was right and Vito really is an eccentric, then he didn't want to do anything that could risk Ren losing out on a potential cure for her condition. As they spoke, Chris spotted Cecil looking them over for a moment before turning away once Chris made eye contact with him. The cats suddenly broke away from the group, hopping off the wolf and hurrying over to Vito, racing each other up his back before perching on his shoulders, as the duo nuzzled his head rather affectionately, causing the man to chuckle and dote on the two of them. "Good morning, you two. Did you miss me?" he mused rather cheerfully, before looking over the approaching group and smiling a little more. "Welcome back, Riley. I see you found everyone, and a few extras," he mentioned as he regarded the adventurers with a look of amusement. The rabbitkin woman, Riley, bobbed her head intently as she looked up to Vito. "Yes, sir. The adventurers say they know you and wish to volunteer their services in escorting you to the capital," she explained dutifully. The massive wolf moved to settle beside Vito, the man reaching out and resting a hand on its head as he ruffled their fur as well, before looking at the guildmaster with a smile. "There we go. Now I've got those extra escorts that you were insisting I find. I think a trio of steels on their way to becoming sapphires are certainly dependable enough to watch my back." The guildmaster just smiled a bit while stroking his beard, regarding the trio of adventurers before also looking over Chris and his team. His eyes lingered on Ren for a moment before looking up at Vito and nodding his assent. "I suppose it is now a suitably big enough group to watch over your carriages. Very well, I'll let the matter rest." Vito chuckled a bit at that. "Well, I am glad I have your approval," he mused before regarding the group as a whole. "Feel free to load your things in that carriage over there. We'll be heading out soon enough," he explained before gesturing to said carriage, which was currently being loaded with a variety of bags and crates. As Chris and his team followed the adventurers, he spotted another nicely dressed individual, a grey lizard man with a stone-grey scales going over some kind of checklist. He looked up from his paperwork and smiled a bit as he regarded the group as a whole. "I take it you'll be Mr. Vito's escort. Glad to have you all along. We'll be in your care," he expressed pleasantly enough. "Do any of you have any experience driving a carriage?" he asked as he looked among them. Rance and even Zax held up their hand, much to Chris's surprise, as the lizardkin man smiled a little more. "That is great to hear. I thought I would be glued to the seat for the whole journey," he mused with no small amount of relief. "Go ahead and unload your things here. The other carriage is more meant for Mr. Vito's merchandise."
"Merchandise?"
Cecil piped up curiously, looking especially interested for whatever reason.
"What does Mr. Vito sell?"
The lizardkin man flashed a toothy smile as he seemed rather happy to talk about the subject. "He is an artist, true and true. With a simple pile of sand or a humble rock, he can bend the materials to his will, using magic to make something surprisingly intricate and detailed. I haven't seen anything like it before. It supposedly takes a lot out of him, but when he really commits to his work, he can make a 5-foot statue faster than I've ever seen done before." Chris was rather skeptical when it came to the lizardkin's claim in regards to Vito getting tired out after a single statue after seeing him create 3-story stone walls in a matter of seconds. Though he could guess his new boss was playing some kind of angle and opted just to keep the detail to himself.
So no magical items or artifacts?"
Cecil asked, looking especially disappointed for a moment. Then he seemed to regard his staff and almost immediately perked up for some reason or another. The lizardkin looked a little confused by that comment, but just went back to his work as he began reviewing the next checklist, while the adventurers and his team began loading their packs into the carriage. As Chris shrugged off his satchel, he turned to help Wren with her things, only to realize she wasn't by his side anymore. Feeling his heart skip a beat, he quickly looked around before watching as she marched right up to Vito, while he was talking to the dwarf and tugged at his cloak. Vito looked fairly surprised by the interruption, but smiled a bit as he looked down at her. "Ah, you must be Chris's sister. Did you need something?" Wren, for her part, crossed her arms as she looked up at Vito, with a surprisingly defiant look on her face.
"You're not going to scare my brother, are you? He said you promised to heal me if he worked for you, but if you're just some nobody artist, how exactly are you going to heal me?"
The guildmaster looked vaguely amused by Wren's accusation before looking over to Vito curiously. Chris quickly closed the distance between himself and Wren, gently grabbing her by the shoulders and pulling her back behind himself. As he looked at Vito with clear fear in his eyes, he could hear his heart thumping in his ears before letting out a nervous chuckle.
Forgive my sister, boss, Mr. Vito. She hasn't seen what you're capable of.
I promise you she's only acts out of ignorance. Vito just smiled a bit before regarding the guildmaster. "He was amongst the thieves that robbed me yesterday," he mentioned simply, the guildmaster just nodding as if that explained everything. Vito then looked between Chris and Wren before getting down to one knee to get closer to Wren's eye level. "I can tell that you care for your brother a lot, and you're very brave for your age. I can respect that," he mused with another smile before standing tall. "As for whether or not I'm the real deal, well, you're just gonna have to wait and see. Just don't push yourself, and I'll look you over later today." He then looked at Chris and chuckled a bit. "As for you, relax a bit. I already told you I don't mind thieves." With that, he returned away, walking off with the guildmaster as they talked about something else. Despite what he said, Chris couldn't help but feel as if he just dodged an arrow as he looked at Wren, not even sure what to say to her. Whether or not to count himself lucky that nothing happened to her, or to chastise her for antagonizing the man. Wren, for her part, still looked unsure as she kept her arms crossed.
"He's a weird man,"
she said simply, before finally uncrossing her arms and looking up to Chris. Chris just sighed as he ruffled her hair through her hood before pulling back. "And you're an idiot. Come on, let's go load up your things," he said as he led her back to the carriages. End of chapter. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Sevaren Serberous, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Light Jock, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Lord Asrical. Thank you very much.